to movies that move me. I'm your host, Elijah Winfrey. It has been far too long, my friends, I admit, but I am back in the saddle once again to talk about another movie that made me want to be a filmmaker. This film comes from the year 1998. It was the summer of 98, and it was supposed to be the summer of this movie. This movie was supposed to basically blow all other movies out of the water that summer. And I'm not saying it did or it didn't, but I know that there's a lot of people that look at this movie and they're not really happy with this film. But it still inspires me, okay? It still inspires me. The movie we're talking about today is Godzilla from 1998. Now, here's the deal, okay? This movie had a massive budget, okay? It had a whole lot of people working on it. But in some ways, it reminds me of being an independent filmmaker. And I'm going to need you to kind of follow me on this one for you to get where I'm coming from. But as far as the actual movie is concerned, if you've never seen it, most Godzilla fans will tell you there's Godzilla, and then there's this movie way over here in the corner. If you want to watch it, cool. If you don't want to watch it, you're not really missing much. That's what a lot of Godzilla fans will tell you. For me, when I grew up as a kid, man, I loved this Godzilla movie. I'm not going to front about it. I love this Godzilla movie. And to this day, if I just want to have a good time with a Godzilla movie, I'll put this on. You know, because it's a movie that I kind of look at that has no strings attached to it. You know, you don't have to watch 5 other movies to understand what's going on in this one. You just pop it in, sit back, get your big bucket of popcorn, your big drink, and just enjoy, okay? It's a great monster film, and a lot of people will tell you that. It's a great monster film, but not a great Godzilla film. And that's kind of where we lead into some of the issues. But before we get to the issues, if you haven't seen the movie before, here's what it's about. During a nuclear test, the French government inadvertently mutates a lizard nest. Years later, a giant lizard makes its way to New York City. Dr. Nico Titopoulos, played by Matthew Broderick, can't believe I nailed that, an expert on the effects of radiation on animals, is sent by the U.S. government to study the beast. When the creature, dubbed Godzilla by news outlets, emerges, a massive battle with the military begins. To make matters worse, Nico discovers that Godzilla has laid a nest of 200 eggs, and they are ready to hatch. So that's what this story is about, okay? And again, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of CGI. It's over the top, okay? But here's where some of the issues started with this film. Right at the beginning, actually, because the folks who own Godzilla had certain rules that the company producing this film had to follow in order to be allowed to make an Americanized version of Godzilla. You know, the creature could look this way, but not that way. The creature could use this move, but not that move. There was a lot of things that they wanted to keep to themselves so that the original version of Godzilla would never be confused with the Americanized version of it. And that's the simplest way I can put it. But the other thing that they said to the folks making this film was that they were not allowed to show Godzilla in any of the lead-up marketing. Now, once the movie is out and people have already seen what the character looks like, of course, then you can have commercials with him in it, and which is why you will see toy commercials with Godzilla in it, the full-body Godzilla. But if you look at the lead-up commercials, not so much. And that's kind of where I think it reminds me of an independent production almost, you know, in a way. Because when you're making an independent film, everything that can go wrong oftentimes will go wrong. And you have to deal with certain, you know, confinements, you know, and your vision ends up getting a little bit twisted, a little bit gnarly, if you will, because of things going on around your production. And I feel like that definitely happened with this, because I feel like if they could have had Godzilla look like the way that everybody expected Godzilla to look like, they would have done it like that. If they could have had Godzilla in all their lead-up marketing, they certainly would have. But because they were not allowed to, they had to be extra creative, because they were already going to be creative, but now they got to be extra creative to get around this landmine, so to speak. So what did they do? Well, you may remember the Taco Bell commercials, okay? Now, here's the funny thing about those Taco Bell commercials. They never actually showed Godzilla in full form. They would show a tail, right? Or they would show the dog with the box saying, uh-oh, I think we might need a bigger box, okay? Another thing that they would do is they would take buses and they would wrap the buses and they would say his tail is as long as this bus. And that's what it would say in the text, the Godzilla text. And then people would look at it and go, oh, that's kind of interesting. And they had the whole size does matter, slogan that they would throw on everything. They would have a building and they would say he is as tall as this building, because they would wrap, a billboard or something with their text. And it was a lot of that. It was a lot of, trying to get people to imagine what they couldn't see. And so to me, I find that to be kind of inspiring, because it's like, look at this Godzilla production. They had their main character is Godzilla, because nobody goes to a Godzilla movie for the people. Okay. And if they do, they're kind of missing the point. The people are like an add-on bonus, right? But here's this movie where they can't even utilize the thing that everybody's going to go see. And yet they were still able to figure out a way to make people want to go to this movie and have a successful time. Now, again, the whole critic part of it, that's not really what I dive into on this. But for me, as an independent filmmaker, I'm looking at it going, okay, so if I ever run into a situation where marketing just seems like it's just not going to happen, that there's no way I can make this work, I got to think about Godzilla, because they were facing a hell of a time with this one. But for me, like I said at the beginning, I love this film. I love this film. I'm not apologetic about it either. I love this film. I'm not sorry for it. Do I think it's one of the best Godzilla movies? No, I don't. I don't think it's one of the best Godzilla movies. I think it is a great monster movie, though. I think if it was, titled something else, people would love it. But because it's titled Godzilla, well, then there's a certain, certain level of things that come with that. One final story here, and I have to throw this in because I think this is kind of funny. So apparently George Lucas and the folks at Star Wars decided to kind of pull some punches at Godzilla, because they knew their Phantom Menace movie was coming out in '99. And so what they did is they took the Godzilla text and the black background that was featured in many Godzilla posters, because remember, they couldn't actually use the monster. So some posters literally just said size does matter with a black background. And what Star Wars did is they took what the critics were saying about this film, which is that it was all, all popcorn stuff and no story. Like basically the story sucked. That's what a lot of the critics said. And what they did is they slapped together a Star Wars poster using the Godzilla text that said, plot does matter. And they actually posted it on the Star Wars website for a brief moment in time, just brief enough for someone to be able to get a picture of it. But if you can ever find that to me is kind of funny. But again, I love both my Star Wars and I love my Godzilla movies, but I had to talk about this one from '98 because of all the interesting things, like I said, going on in the outside. How do you promote a movie when you're not allowed to promote the main character of the film? And I think they did a great job finding a workaround that to this day is still talked about. People still talk about the Taco Bell commercials from Godzilla. They still talk about, this movie. And like I said, a lot of people, they don't talk about it as if they hate it. They talk about it as if, hey, if it was something else, if it wasn't a Godzilla movie, it would probably be one of the best monster films. And so, take that for what you will. But again, for me, Godzilla from '98, it's a movie that moved me. That's for sure.